All right, what's up everybody? Welcome back to Make It Custom. I'm Carl Fisher, and today I'm back on Kristina's Cadillac. It has been something that has been kind of backburned for a little bit, so I want to get back on it. I want to get back on all the projects actually, but today what I'm going to attack is these front fenders. They are rusty, very rusty, and I'd like to get them taken care of because as you may know or assume, Cadillac fenders aren't easy to come by, and I just want to fix them. So the inner structure is gone. The exterior structure is not only dented and body filled, there's like little bits of Bondo on the other side. You can see poking through. It's really a big chunk that I would like to replace. Here's all those Bondo kind of drools, as I'll call them. But this inner structure is made of 14 gauge, and it's got a few different profiles in it and the little holes cut in it, as well as some flanges. So we're gonna work on repairing this inner structure first before we get to the outside. So this will be a good video. I'm gonna have fun with it, and I'm gonna try and give you as many tips as I can along the way. So don't forget to like, click subscribe, hit notifications. Let's work on the Caddy. All right, so let's talk about this just for a second. How are we going to go about this repair? So I always like to work from the inside out. I believe that it kind of just makes sense. And lucky enough for us, we've got both fenders in kind of different condition. The inner structure of this fender is actually okay. So what we're gonna do, let's check it out. Here's the inner structure. We'll be able to take our pattern from this, because the other one has a giant hole here and we don't know where this is. And typically I like to repair it as stock as I can. I think it's kind of fun to try and think about ways as we can make this perfect, you know? There's actually a couple of little bits here that are gonna be a little tricky. There's almost like a bead roll here where this is actually stepped down and then it's flanged up. So that's something that we're gonna have to think about a way to make that shape in here. And then there's this flange. So I've mic'd this at about 80 thou, which is maybe a little bit larger than 14 gauge, which is 74 thousandths of an inch. But I assume it is the correct measurement because this is a little bit rusty and maybe grew a little bit just from rust flake and that kind of thing. So what I'm gonna do first is just take a pattern of this piece so that I can get my hole locations, my flange height, all those things, where the bend is gonna be, and we're gonna make this as a flat piece first. It's got a little bit of a curve in it. You can see from this side, it's got this curve. So I think what I'm going to do, and oh, you can also see very well in this view that this is the outer skin wrapped over that inner structure. So that inner structure is 14 gauge. This outer skin is probably 19 gauge. We're gonna repair it with 18 gauge today. Just something I do. If I'm gonna repair it, I'd rather go 18 than 20. 20 is easier, but you know, if it's gonna rust in that area, wouldn't you rather have just a tiny bit thicker material? That's just my way of thinking on it. You can see there's a couple spot welds that hold that outer skin to the inner skin. So this inner structure we'll take a template of, and it'll be the reverse side for this fender, because we're not gonna have to replace the inner structure here. We're only gonna have to do it on this fender. So that's what we're gonna do today, is just make sure that we get a beautiful inner structure there. And I'm gonna try and do this whole video with tools that you guys could have or borrow from your buddies, like simple stuff. I'm not gonna go crazy. I'm not gonna use the CNC. I'm not gonna do any of that. We're just gonna use like an angle grinder, some hammers, dollies, that sort of thing. Might use the torch for a little bit of it. If you don't have a torch, hopefully you've got a buddy that you can borrow one from, but I would highly suggest having that in your tool bank. You know, on Marketplace, I see them all the time for 300 bucks, 350 bucks. It's cheaper than a welder and you can weld with it. So I would rather have a torch before I even bought a welder. Obviously it'd be sweet if you had both, but don't underestimate the torch. It's basically my takeaway. So let's get onto that. I'm just gonna flip this over and start having a look and just getting a template made up from this side, so that we can trace it out onto some 14 gauge and start building our hammer form. right, so got these pieces bent over. They turned out pretty nice. Don't need a brake for that. I wanted a little bit of a soft roll because that's what's on the piece we're trying to copy. So we rolled that edge over a little bit. So I cut this piece out here, and what this piece indicates is that little step or that bead roll that I'm talking about in this piece. It is important. I know these details, like it seems like you don't really need them. You can just do some straight stuff and replace it. Well, you could, but the reason why this detail is here is because when the outer skin pinches on, it is touching this edge because it's protruding out. This surface area is not against the fender, therefore it won't rattle against the fender. It's stepped off the fender because there is this bead roll that protrudes a small line like this out. That's why it's there, and that's, you know, that's the way they designed it. That's why, I don't know, that's why I'm trying to make it look like that. So what I'm gonna do to press that detail into it is I'm going to use a piece of this same 14 gauge, which is about what the size step is. I'm gonna put it on my hammer form like this. This is not something I've done before. This is just me trying to think of a way to duplicate what's going on here. So I'm gonna take this piece, I'm gonna weld it on here, just a tack and a tack, because I wanna pull it off and use the same piece on the other side. So I'm just gonna tack and tack that on there. I'm gonna put my piece over top, and then I'm gonna take a piece of scrap steel here, and I'm going to put some more steel around it like this to make a step like that, this little step. And then I'll be able to hold that, maybe I'll weld a bar to it or something, and I'll hold that right where I want it to be. And then I'm obviously gonna cut this off, and I'm gonna use that as a hammer, as like almost like a corking tool to, you know, hold that piece on there, smack it with a hammer, and just work my way down. I might apply a bunch of heat to this to make it really soft so that it happens relatively easily. That's just me trying to figure out a way to do it. I haven't done it exactly like that before, but I think it should work, so we'll give that a shot. All right, let's give this a shot. I made this little fence here to clamp that piece down. I've got this step. I kind of rolled the edges a little bit. I'm gonna try and do it without heat first, just to see if it's gonna work just fine without heat. So brute force, take one. It's definitely working. Looks like I might have this a little bit too deep, the cut in here, because it's not flattening this side. So what I'll do is I'll just shave this down a little bit. Okay, let's see if that'll do it. Came a little bit loose. A little bit loosey-goosey. Still lined up? Not really. Always got to make sure your clamps are super tight, because mine just loosened off a little bit. It's not really that big of a deal, but it did move a little bit here, so I just readjusted it now. Give this another shot. I mean, essentially what we're doing is we're almost just like a pull max, like what a pull max would do when you make a profile die and it's got a fixed stroke and it just reciprocates up and down. It's working really well though. Didn't need the torch. Yeah, I'm really happy with that. Just tune this edge back up a little bit. And this fades away to nothing when that bottom lip turns into the bottom 2 bolts of the fender. So there it is. Man, that worked awesome. 14 gauge. Pretty thick stuff. Yeah. Okay, so I got these pieces kind of swaged in there. It did work pretty good. I think that I could have gone a little bit deeper because they seem not quite as deep, but I'm being too picky about it. This is totally fine. So we got both of those made. The other thing I did notice is that this is a little bit too short on the one side. So what I'm going to end up doing is just swaging this down to the end, and then I'll just weld the little transition on there where it angles. That was my bad. I didn't make enough room there for it. But anyway, what's up next is I'm going to try and bend these. I'm thinking of ways that I can actually get a little bit of curve in there, because if we can go look at this, you see there's that curve in there. So what I'm going to try and do is just find something that I can basically rest this on and maybe hammer something along there to get a little bit of a slow curve. I'll just keep checking it on this. I've got marks on my template where this is and where these are. So once I've got the curve in it, then I'll drill those holes. The reason being is that if you put a slot or something into this, and then I'm trying to curve this evenly, it's gonna wanna bend more where it's weaker. So that's why I'm gonna leave these details till the end. That's what's up next. Okay, so let's have a look at these pieces for a second here. So you saw me weld this little chunk on. I think that you probably figured out what that was for. That was so that we could gain the curve in here using our pipe dolly, but we wanted to make sure that this step didn't flatten out while we were hitting on top of it. So I just used another piece of that same material, 14 gauge, and we did that. So it did work pretty well. It was, you know, a little bit of tweaking and this and that. This piece I think turned out better than the other side only because I had to extend the other side. You saw me have to welded this bottom lip on, but I did use a T-dolly. These are just really cheap T-dollies. They're not hardened or anything, but I bought them, I think, Harbor Freight or Princess Auto. They're great. I use them all the time. So I did use the T-dolly to make that roll. Instead of welding and trying to grind that roll, I rolled the edge and then ended up welding on the flat. I always try and do that. That's a kind of a tip, is that whenever you're making anything, it's easier to weld and straighten out your material on the flat than it is on a roll. And then you don't risk the, you know, grinding too much of it away. See the bottom, I've got the nice roll there. You can see here little bits of inconsistent penetration just because I was MIG welding spotting it, but it's plenty strong enough. So I'm gonna leave that. Yeah, we just cut those windows in it. I used a drill for the holes, and then I just used a carbide bit on, where is my tool? I've got this, this little Makita Dremel tool, and it takes 1/4-inch bits, so I was just too lazy to change it to a straight bit, but I just used this ball one. These things eat material like crazy, so if you ever need to get into small areas, I really like that tool. The only other thing that I'm gonna have to do now is, like I'm gonna keep fitting them and weld them on, but the edge of this is a little bit shallower, so I'll have to trim it down a little bit just on the edge there. But right now I'm at the stage where I'm just fitting things. I'm gonna fit this inner in both sides, and I left the outer intact. As horrible as that looks, I left it intact so that I could kind of line things up. And once this one's kind of lined up, I'll make sure that I make a bit of a template, and because there's nothing's gonna be left of this one when I'm done with it. So I'll make sure that that's right. So that's what I'm gonna do now. Just clean this up, get those inner braces attached. I would like to, you know, tack them on, and then I'll probably remove this material so that I can weld on the other side and make them all super sweet. But that's it. I mean, simple tools, guys. You just have to think about how to make those shapes. Like, another thing I want to mention is that, you know, these were dead straight, and I hammered that curve into it. It really wasn't that hard, but you have to think, well, you know, something with a little bit of a softer end on it is going to make that easier, because when you hit this, the edges are being pushed a little bit further because the main contact point is compressing. So that's where I'm getting the bend. I normally use a dense rubber mallet, but I honestly have no idea where it is. So I use the Mother Tucker hammer, and these have nylon ends on them that do have enough give. You know, you can use stuff like a dead blow hammer. It's not specific. If you don't have the identical hammers to me, you can still do this. So, I mean, I'm rambling on now, so I'm just gonna get to work. But simple tools, and just think about what needs to happen. Sometimes you gotta make tools out of scrap to make those bends, but I mean, otherwise, I'm sure that you can't buy those pieces, and they fit really well. Now that I've got it tacked on and lined up for butt welding, there's a couple of small inconsistencies right in here that, again, I'm being way too picky, but since I'm gonna cut the outer skin off, I'm gonna cut it off now. That way I can prep the other side of this joint, and I can hammer and dolly just a little bit to line these things up a little. All right, a little shop update I think is worth mentioning. Jordan's been here for a few weeks. We've been working on his grill shell for his little single seat race car. And basically he sort of talked me out of a few of my tools. Number one, bead roller. It's gone, loaded in a container off to Australia. The Sosa Metalworks Shape-O-Matic power hammer also is gone. And last but not least, he took home one of the planishing hammers as well. So basically what I'm trying to say is that I know you guys have been kind of getting after me because I've been dragging my feet on the bead roller video, and Elio and I have slowly been kind of picking away at it. Well, it's time to step it in high gear. So we have a bead roller video coming because we're going to build a bead roller, as well as I got one of Sosa Metalworks' new Shape-O-Matic kits. Really excited about it. Going to build that on here as well. So those are a couple videos that are coming up. I know that you guys have been asking me about. So there's that. Okay, let's have a look at these fenders. I just did a bit of a shop cleanup, try and get reorganized here, and pretty happy with the way the fenders came out. These little inner pieces, they were a little bit tricky, but very basic as well. Like, you just have to kind of think about how to make these shapes using scrap metal, and that's a lot of what restoration is to me anyway, is kind of, you know, figuring out how to do it, because a lot of this, there is no book. If you want to, you know, restore a car and you need to make pieces that are not available, you just got to use what you got at hand. So you don't need you know, a Pullmax or power hammers or whatever, you can use, you know, simple tools, because let's be honest, they've been doing it since simple tools were the only thing around. So let's have a closer look at this. This is the inner piece we took out. It looked solid, but as you can see, super deep pitting on the other side. That's why it blew through on us when we used the wire wheel on it. So this is all blended right in. I did weld both sides just because I like to get a nice finish. If we TIG welded this, I think that I could have got enough penetration where you wouldn't need to weld both sides, and you'd actually have a little bit of under weld to grind on the other side to make it you know, perfectly the material thickness. So yeah, I mean, this is 14 gauge. Let's just drill that into you. This is 14 gauge. This is thick stuff. This is you know, I think it's 0.75 or something like that thickness. So it is a little bit tougher, but no heat used, and you can get these curves and manipulate that material, you know, with just hammers and scrap steel dollies. You know, this worked out pretty well. I don't think that mine is as deep by a few thou as what stock is, but it's very close. Like, the thickness of the material as the step worked out pretty good. I did end up welding this on here. I know I said that I wasn't gonna weld the other side, but I did. I went ahead and welded it. I just wanted it to look really nice. You know, this is how I would do something as a restoration for a customer. I like to try and make it as nice as possible, as stock looking as possible. I'd like it to be to the point where somebody would not be able to tell. Obviously, you only go as far as you need to go, because you know, you definitely don't need to go this far if it's just a custom vehicle. But anyway, very happy with the repair. This is part 1 of 2. So I'm going to do another video on making the outer skins for this and wrapping it onto here. I'm not sure exactly how I'm going to do that yet, if I'm going to hammer form it separately or maybe actually put the patch panel on and then hammer it around this inner, since it's nice and thick. But stay tuned for that. There is a bunch of damage in this one, so I'm going to make a whole big bottom section of this fender. The worst one, there's creases, and these are Bondo driplets that are coming out the backside. But anyway, there it is. So thanks a lot for watching Make It Custom again, everybody. Really appreciate you guys. I know the last few weeks I haven't been building a whole lot on the projects. You know, I've been kind of dragging my feet myself, but I'm feeling a little bit more motivated to smash some stuff out. So I'm happy that we're back on the Cadillac. I did get a bunch of parts for the Roadster, which I have not worked on in a very long time. And I'm very excited to try and get back onto that. I know that I've got some plans for a dash and a center waterfall, some metal shaping in there. Thanks a lot for sticking with us, everybody. Don't forget to like, subscribe, hit notifications, and we'll catch you on the next one.